Hey everybody, and welcome to Dominion Cards. This is a video series where we take an in-depth look at the strategy around individual cards from the board game Dominion. Today we're looking at Bandit. This is a 5-cost action and attack from the 2nd edition base game. And it says, gain a gold. Each other player reveals the top 2 cards of their deck, trashes a revealed treasure other than copper, and discards the rest. So it's worth noting that this can trash at most 1 card per opponent, per play, and also the person who is being attacked is the one who actually chooses which card gets trashed. So just before we talk about this in more detail, just a general note, because this is the first attack card I'm doing a video on. Many attacks are what I call stackable attacks, and that means that if you keep playing them in a turn, they continue to have an effect. Some attacks like Militia, for example. Militia is a card that says discard down to 3 cards in hand. Militia is not stackable. Once your opponent is already at 3 cards in hand, playing a second Militia, the attack part isn't going to do anything anymore. Bandit is an example of a stackable attack, and that means that the more of them you play, the more often the attack happens. Stackable attacks tend to be more impactful on a board if you have more players. So these videos tend to primarily consider 2-player games. Part of the reason for that is because, an individual player strategy has more of an impact when there's less opponents. On a 2-player game, you take half of the turns in the game, and the more players you add, the less, percentage of the game constitute your turns, and sort of the less overall control you have over the game. Dominion is a game where the players are in full control of when the game ends, depending on what they're buying and which piles they're running down. So obviously if you have more of the turns in the game, then you get much more of an impact on that. So it can be hard sometimes to talk about games that are more than 2-player. So we just tend to focus on 2-player here. However, I will try, where possible, to just make some notes about when you're playing with more than 2 players for some of the more casual players out there who tend to play Dominion at real-life gatherings rather than the competitive 2-player online scene. So, Bandit, let's get into the detail on this. In 2-player, you typically want Bandit because of its ability to gain golds. That first sentence, gain a gold, that's the most important sentence on Bandit for you a lot of the time. Gold itself is a pretty efficient money gainer in terms of the number of cards in your hand, right? The gold doesn't cost you an action and it gives you 3 money that turn, and that's pretty good. The big drawback with gold, of course, is that it's very expensive. It costs 6. 6 is sort of reserved for incredibly good cards, usually, so, action cards that cost 6 are going to be really, really good. 5-cost cards are usually very good as well. In fact, many 5-cost cards will be better than a gold, and they are cheaper. But that's sort of deliberate for the good health of the game, because gold is always available. If it was really, really good card for 6, you would just buy gold a lot, and you would sort of ignore the rest of the cards in the game. So gold is sort of, it's very expensive for what it does if you're buying it. Now, Bandit gives you gold without actually having to buy it. And hey, a gold for free, that's actually really good, right? You're getting all the benefit of that quite expensive card without paying any of the cost. So it should be pretty obvious to see why Bandit is quite appealing. Even better is that although these golds are free, they are still treated as cards that cost 6. So that means if you have a card that wants to trash expensive cards, what I call a cost-relevant trasher, so something like Remodel, then that's really good with cards like Bandit, because, you can remodel golds into provinces, and if you're getting the golds for free, then you can buy other things while getting all of the fuel for those trashers. So gold gainers, they can be pretty good. But you got to watch out, because gold is what we call a stop card. So stop card means that the card itself doesn't draw you more cards. So if you get a lot of golds, they are just going to sit there and clog up your deck. Now, if you're going to clog up your deck with stop cards, admittedly, gold is not the worst thing in the world, right? If you've got a turn of golds, then it's pretty easy to just buy province on your turn. But, a lot of boards really want you to just continually draw your deck every turn, and if you get a whole bunch of golds, they reduce your reliability, right? They make it harder to pair up your villages with your smithies, and you struggle to draw your deck. So Bandit tends to work very well as what we call a payload for an engine. So what we mean by payload is that if you are drawing your deck, you sort of need to ask yourself, what exactly is it that I'm trying to do every turn? So if, for example, there is nothing really to do and you can only buy one card per turn, then you only have to draw your deck to the point where you generate 8 money, right? There's no action cards you really want to play necessarily, and building more and drawing more isn't necessarily going to help. So payload cards are what we call cards that are really, really good that you want to play in an engine. It's sort of like the goal of drawing your deck is to play that card every turn, and Bandit fits very clearly into this category. When Bandit is around, what you usually want to do, you don't want stop cards straight away. You want to focus, first of all, on building up all of your draw and getting your engine running. I keep saying it in these videos, and this is no exception. Decks that draw all of their cards are very, very strong, and usually it is the goal and the best strategy of what you want to do. So with Bandit, I think new players tend to open with it early because they think, I want to get the golds straight away, but that's not usually the case. What you want to do is you want to start drawing your deck, then you get the Bandit, then you continue to build up by getting the free golds while you spend your buys on more draw and more reliability so you can support all of the incoming golds. If you buy Bandit too early, you just get the golds in too early, you stop drawing your deck, and that means you also start playing Bandit slightly less as well. So like everything just sort of starts to slow down. So you've got to watch out for that. Now, Bandit, we've only talked about 3 words on the card. There's all this other text available on the card as well, and this is the trashing attack. So in 2-player, the trashing attack usually isn't very good, and it's largely not noticeable. One thing is that this is a stackable attack, but it gains you a stop card every time you play it. So if you aim to say, I'm going to play Bandit a lot, I'm going to buy 2 of them, and I'm going to try and throne room 2 of them every turn, then what you find is you just start getting so many golds so quickly that suddenly you can't do that anymore, right? You stop being able to draw your deck, you bloat it up. So Bandit sort of has a sort of almost built-in just counter against having it be played a lot, and that is that it just starts to gum up your deck. In addition to that, because Bandits make for great engine payload, what you tend to find is that when Bandit is good on a board, people are playing with these decks that are mostly made out of action cards that they're trying to draw their deck with. Now, when you play Bandit, it reveals 2 cards from the top of your deck and sort of hunts for non-copper treasures. And you probably just don't have very many in your deck when you're trying to draw your engine. If you have 15 to 20 cards in total, a single Bandit attack is going to be looking at around 10% of all of the cards in the deck. So if they only have 1 or 2 silvers, it's actually quite hard to find them. And most of the time, Bandit is just going to miss, right, against those sorts of decks. So that sort of deck, not only is it great for playing Bandit, the action-heavy deck drawing deck, but it's also good against Bandit because Bandit just isn't really having much impact, its attack, on that sort of deck. Lastly, Bandit itself is sort of a counter to Bandit, so if you're actually worried that your treasures are going to get trashed, well, on every board with Bandit, there is this card that gains you more treasures to offset the attack, and that card is, of course, your own Bandit. So Bandit, a lot of the time when Bandit is actually attacking and trashing your opponent's high-value treasures, those will be treasures that they also gain from their own Bandit, and they're just replacing them every turn, and so it's a bit of a wash, right? So a lot of the time, the attack is not really doing anything. But there are, of course, always exceptions. Sometimes on the board, they will have some very powerful, very expensive treasures or important ones. So like platinum, when you start playing with the prosperity expansion, this is a 9 cost treasure that generates 5 money. This is at risk from Bandit, and it can actually be quite damaging if one of those gets trashed. So you look for these situations where the attack from Bandit might actually deal some more damage, and that's an example of one. Potion is another card. You need to use it specifically to buy certain cards, and maybe Bandit will trash it and just sort of slow down your opponent slightly. There are, of course, a lot more examples, but I'm not going to go through them all. One other thing to note, of course, is that Bandit reveals 2 cards, and sometimes it will reveal 2 different types of treasure that can be trashed, so usually that would be like 1 silver and 1 gold, but your opponent is the one who gets to pick, so usually they're going to pick the treasure that they don't mind losing as much. So in the case of like silver versus gold, they might decide that rather they'd get rid of the silver, and so Bandit, sometimes the attacks might be slightly less effective, just in that they tend to focus more on the less valuable treasures that they can trash. But obviously, of course, sometimes, a lot of the time, they don't necessarily have a choice. But when they do, it tends to pick the lower value treasure. Now, it's true that Bandit's attack tends to be... it slows down what we call like big money decks, so decks that are mostly made out of treasures where the opponent's just buying silver and gold quite a lot. But bear in mind that those sorts of decks are usually pretty bad anyway, so like Bandit isn't necessarily going to win your game on its own by crippling those types of decks, because those types of decks, in the decks where Bandit is good, they weren't going to win anyway because there was a nice draw engine available. So I don't know how useful in 2-player it is to think about Bandit as a counter to big money, because big money, it's rubbish in 2-player, put it quite simply, a lot of the time. One card that I think is just worth mentioning, so there's this card in Renaissance, it's a project, it's called Capitalism, and when you buy it, every time it's your turn, any action card that generates money also counts as a treasure. So if you buy this, your bandits suddenly are able to target certain action cards, and that can actually be pretty good. Right now, Bandit, instead of trashing these treasures, they're trashing the actual cards that your opponent cares about more. And it's you who has to buy Capitalism to get that effect. So, if your opponent doesn't buy it, well, it doesn't matter because you're still going to be hitting their actions, right? Their action cards also become treasures on your turn when you have Capitalism. So that's just money trashing attacks. Capitalism, you need to watch out for it, and Bandit is no exception. So we spoke a bit about big money, but I know there are a lot of people who are new tend to look at Bandit and say, oh, Bandit gets me gold, so it's going to be really good to throw Bandits and just play these like treasure-heavy decks where I have a lot of gold. And actually, Bandit isn't that good for big money. And part of the reason why is because gainer cards in general are not very good for big money, because the card that you gain goes to your discard and you have to shuffle again before you see it. So if you consider that a player buys a Bandit, the Bandit that they bought goes into their shuffle, goes into their discard, they shuffle their deck, they then have to find the Bandit, they play it, the gold goes into their discard, they have to draw through their deck and shuffle a second time, and then finally they might be able to get their gold. If you had a deck of 25 cards and you don't have any draw, the turn after you buy Bandit, you could be waiting anywhere from like 6 to 14 turns just to play your first gold that came from a Bandit. And that can easily become like half of the length of the game just for your first gold, and that's terrible. This is assuming, of course, that Bandit doesn't miss the shuffle. If it does, then you've got yet another shuffle to go through, at which point you may even just never see that gold. and it was completely pointless. That is because Bandit, on the turn that you play it, it's not giving you draw, it's not giving you money, so it's pretty bad for these decks that churn really, really slowly through their deck. That is why Bandit works quite well as an engine payload, because as a gainer, you get to play the cards that it gains either next turn or possibly even this turn, right? So you start to see improvement very, very quickly, and the improvement just keeps adding very quickly if you can play it every turn. A couple of other things you need to think about. It is possible, I guess, that you can run out of money with Bandit if you haven't bought one yet. So if you have something like Moneylender that's trashing all of your coppers and you don't get a Bandit, what can happen is that so your opponent gets a Bandit and it finds, by luck, your silvers, and you can actually run out of money. It's something that you should keep in mind, even though you won't really see it happen very often. If you've trashed all your coppers and you have 2 silvers, and that's basically all of your money, then what you can find is that if Bandit finds one of them and trashes it, you can now only generate 2 money in your deck, and that's actually not enough to get a silver. And that's a really bad position to be in. So you do want to watch out for situations like that. If you are worried that all of your money might get trashed, then you should really consider just picking up a Bandit. Again, Bandit is its own counter to Bandit, so it can just, you just start replacing the treasures that they trash with your own golds, and you're good again. Of course, one more thing, if Bandit, if you don't have very many buys, then there is a limit to how much money that you need. Bandit will just keep gaining you golds if you keep playing it. At some point, you might actually just have more golds than you need. So it is okay to just stop playing Bandit if you have too much money. Maybe you would like 1 extra treasure card over what you need, so that if one is found, you still have enough to buy what you want that turn. Like, if you had 3 golds to get a province, maybe you just want a 4th in case your opponent Bandit hits one. You still have 3 left to hit province. And Merchant, I just wanted to call out as a card from the base game. So Merchant requires that you have at least 1 silver in your deck for it to actually generate you some money. And if you are only planning to have 1 silver, then you can find that your opponent's Bandit, by luck, happens to hit that silver. And now this turn, it could be that all of your merchants stop generating money. And that can be, in some decks, quite a big difference in the amount of money you get that turn if this happens to you. So that's another thing to keep in mind. You certainly want a little bit of silver redundancy in that case, just in case. Make sure you have probably 2 silvers. So if one gets hit, it's not the end of the world. But again, you won't necessarily see this that often. If you've got a whole bunch of merchants, then your Bandit's probably going to find those and discard them rather than hit your silver. But you always want to just watch out for these small edge cases sometimes. So like I said, we're going to talk a bit more about games where you have more than 2 players. So Bandit's attack just gets a bit worse, or rather it gets better, should I say, if you have more players. It gets better in the sense that it has more impact. It's not necessarily better for you. And this is because, if you have 1 opponent and they are playing Bandit, then they are gaining a gold every time they play an attack. And they have 1 turn between your turns. So that means you might be getting hit once. And if they play it too many times, their decks are going to clog up. But if you have like 3 opponents, because you're playing 4-player, and each of those has a Bandit, you might get hit 3 times instead of once between your turns. And that means it's much more likely for the Bandits to actually find a treasure and trash it that you don't want it to. In addition to that, because Bandit is its own counter, what you can find is that as someone starts attacking with Bandit, someone else is going to think, I need a way to gain the treasures back that I might be losing, and here's a Bandit, so I'll take that. And now you have 2 players attacking with Bandit, and now another player thinks as well, I need a Bandit as well because I need to replenish these golds that are being hit, and now 3 players are playing Bandit. And you can just, new players that are playing 4-player Dominion can end up in this situation where Bandit is just being played over and over again, and all of these golds are being trashed, and it just thinks, wow, this card, it's so strong. It's just dominating this game. The whole game, you can't have silvers or golds because everyone's just playing these bandits, right? Their own decks don't clog up as much, and that is because, when one player plays a bandit, they gain our gold, but then potentially 3 other players are being hit. So instead of each play of Bandit gaining 1 gold and attacking 1 person, each play of Bandit is gaining them a gold, but they might be being attacked 3 times. So that means that there's less golds going around per attack, and also those golds are more likely to be attacked and trashed from bandit attacks if there's just more flying around. So you can find that Bandit really does start to become this oppressive attack that just is laser-focused trashing all everyone's treasures by sheer numbers of attacks being played. Now, Copper is immune to Bandit, and in these sorts of cases you may consider that rather than wasting your time joining in a round of bandit attacks and where you don't get to keep the money and the golds that it's giving you anyway, you might decide instead to start looking for other ways of getting money. So markets, festivals, poachers. You might struggle with merchants a bit, but some militias, some of those cards that give you money. In addition to that, coppers are safe. So you may decide, maybe what you're going to do is you're just going to keep around 7 coppers or maybe get an 8th, and you're just going to plan to draw your deck and draw all of your coppers. The coppers are immune, so they won't get trashed, and they can be enough to just get a bit of money. So while everyone else is just not generating any money at all their treasures are being trashed, you can just sit there with some immune coppers and just generate all of the money via that instead. But like I say, strategy in 3-player, who knows what will happen in the game. Anything could really happen when you've got more players, and it can be hard to strategize, but, this is just things that you might want to consider. So now what we're going to do is we are going to swap over to the online client, and we are going to force Bandit into some base-only games, and we're going to take a look at what we think about it. Now, I am considering this from 2-player perspective. So what's going on in this kingdom here? So this kingdom, first thing to note, there is no village. You only really get to play 1 action card per turn, except 1 terminal per turn, excuse me. Now, Witch seems pretty good here. Laboratories and Witch are the primary cards. There is no trashing in this game, I notice. So Witch is going to dominate. You really want to try and get the labs first. So you're probably going to open either Poacher Silver or maybe double silver, and you want to get a Witch or 2 and then start getting labs. Bandits would be nice here. However, they sort of get in the way of playing Witch. Whether or not, is it even worth swapping over to Bandit? You might be better off with a mine. Once the curses run out and you, instead of playing 1 Witch per turn, maybe you're better off with a mine, but maybe you aren't. Maybe Bandit is the best terminal after Witch, and you just look to draw with labs. And then you might have a few sellers, and you just start getting golds, and maybe even some Harbingers, because you're going to struggle to draw your deck on this board. Harbinger might be useful to start top-decking some of those golds, but I'm not sure. I think it could go either way between mine and Bandit. I think Bandit's probably usually more useful. It's just that Bandit's adding even more stop cards, and mine doesn't. Mine stops adding more stop cards, so I think it depends kind of on how much you get trashed, because the Bandit gets you up to these high value cards more quickly, so it's nicer with seller. But again, having less stop cards is also quite nice. But this is a very oppressive board with Witch. It dominates a lot. Poacher might be a little bit better. You just want a bunch of poachers, and maybe you just buy a couple of golds and silvers yourself. You buy Witch, the labs run out. Eventually you just buy some treasures. Maybe Bandit, because you can't draw your deck, it is just too slow, and mine is also too slow. So maybe all you're really doing is you're just playing Witch. Bureaucrat is not very good as a replacement to the Bandit. You'd obviously rather play the Bandit instead of the Bureaucrat. So if you're going to go that route. So I think Bandit is a maybe here. I'm not totally sure how good it is compared to the others. And I think it will depend a lot. You have to react to how many labs and witches and how the curse split goes. Maybe once, because you have 2 witches, like you go for 2 witches, you don't buy either of these and you just look to draw a lot with labs and witches, and you just buy your own treasures. So I think it's hard to gauge. I think you have to play that one by ear, but Bandits, it's not great for Bandit. It's only okay. What have we got going on here? So here we have Chapel for extremely good trashing. There is Festival, Throne Room, as your village likes. You really want an artisan to start getting festivals, which might be ignorable here. There is Festival Library, but Throne Room and Smithy are okay. I'm not sure whether you go Festival Library or if you just... The Throne Room Smithy is a lot better. And the labs. So here, Bandit is quite nice. Bandit is quite nice because you're going to look to draw your deck every turn. Artisan, more labs, and Throne Rooms, and Smithies, and Festivals. And then the Bandit you can get at some point, and it just starts building up gold. So you've trashed all of your other treasures, and then Bandit is going to start gaining golds. This is the classic draw your deck engine with Bandit as payload. You're still going to be playing Artisans as payload, so you've got like 2 good cards, which probably not relevant. I think it could go either way between whether you play with Library or Throne Room Smithy, but I actually think the inclusion of Bandit means that Library is bad, and that is because Library doesn't really like you to have golds, but Smithies and Throne Rooms, where you get big deck sizes, do. Because as you gain golds, the Library starts to get stuck on the golds. You have to keep them in your hand until after your action phase, and you can't get rid of them. So yeah, I think this is a Artisan, Festival, Lab, Throne Room, Smithy, and Bandit board, like with the Chapel opening. And those are your key cards, and you're just trying to draw a lot with Smithy, Throne Room. Play Bandit, get a lot of golds, start double provincing, or even triple provincing probably on that game. Just build up, build, and then just a big payoff. What have we got here? So Festival is our only village. Library is the only draw, so this is a Festival Library game. Moneylender trashes, but there's no way to trash the curses from Witch. So you definitely want to get Witch ASAP. Then you're gonna get Moneylender. You're gonna trash all of those coppers. You want a Witch as soon as you can, and then you're going to start getting Festivals and Libraries and start drawing up. Markets and Poachers are good as well. Poacher is good because when the curses run out, you can discard cards you don't want to go for Festival Library. And you're going to draw with all of these cards and play these cards a lot. Maybe you start getting Merchants as well and Silver. I don't think Bandit is that good here just because Library is your main draw. And that means that you're going to struggle with some of the treasures, like it will get you too many treasures too quickly. But if your opponent goes for it, then I think your Merchants might be a bit of a risk, but maybe it's not so bad, right? Because the Merchants aren't going to be all of your money, and it's very easy to just buy a silver back again. I think you can ignore Bandit on this board. I think Bandit is not optimal because you don't really want the golds. There's better ways to earn money. And yeah, it's not a priority. There's so many other 5s that you would rather get first, and they are helping you draw your deck while also giving you economy. So the fact that the golds are stop cards that choke Library is a big no-no for the golds on that board. What do we have here? So again, Chapel for quick trashing, and another Witch board. The Witch is, again, doesn't seem like it's going to be very good here. This seems to be another Festival Library board. We've got Artisan to gain a lot of these components. And again, Poach is probably fine because, it's discarding. It will discard your provinces. This seems very similar to the last game. Did it have Chapel? I can't remember already. No, it didn't. So it's like the last game, but you've got Chapel and you've got Artisan. The lack of markets is a shame. You probably won't get as much money. But again, I think Bandit could be okay here, but you might find it easier to just buy a couple of golds and then province. I don't think you will have quite as much money on your turns, but it seems like you can build a very reliable engine here, and you don't really want Bandit to gum up your deck. So I think this is another ignorable board for Bandit. And let's take a look at the last one. So, look, another Witch Kingdom. I think these all had Witch in it, didn't they? You got Sentry for trashing here, so you want to hit 5 as soon as possible. It's really important to trash because you got Witch. Village is your only village, that's fine. I think you open with Militia to stop your opponent hitting 5 and Silver. You look to get a Sentry or 2. You start getting Witches. You have to buy all of your labs, and there's no plus buys. I think because of that, and moneylenders trashing your copper, what you're going to look to do is you're probably going to just buy your own golds. You're going to focus on junking your opponent and keeping yourself clean. Then you don't need to go above 8, and there's no... Bandit's the only gainer, but it only gains you golds. So I think you look to play a load of labs. You just want a load of 5-cost cards for a while, and then you're going to be playing Militia on your opponent, and you're going to have 2 golds that you probably bought yourself. And I think you only bother with Bandit if your opponent gets one and you're a little bit worried that they might trash your golds. But bear in mind, you are spending a turn that usually you might have been able to spend on a gold. Bandit is okay here. It is something that's not really that impactful. You might get one. I don't think you would use Moat as a defense. You just gain your own Bandit as a defense, and you just gain a couple of extra golds. There were no remodels in these games, so we didn't get to see the whole remodel combo again, like the remodel game. But never mind, it's just random kingdoms. I don't know what's going to come up. Anyway, I hope that was interesting for you. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you for the next video. Thank you and goodbye.